The Lotus Emira is one of my favorite new sports cars on sale today. For right around $100,000, you get an impossibly great blend of analog driving feel, a comfortable and refined ride for everyday driving, and drop-dead gorgeous looks. But Lotus gives you different options for the Emira depending on your tastes. You can get the V6 with a manual or a torque converter auto, although I don't know why you'd do that. Or you can get the inline 4-cylinder turbo AMG engine with an 8-speed dual clutch transmission. Today, we're going to compare the V6 manual non-first edition with the touring suspension, so the softer of the two suspension options, against the AMG-powered 4-cylinder version, also with the touring suspension. Both of these cars are 2025 model years. Shout out to Boardwalk Lotus for providing the inline 4-cylinder we're about to drive, and also for selling this V6 to the owner Mike. Shout out to Mike as well. So specs about the V6. Well, this is powered by the Toyota 2GR FE engine. It's a 3.5 liter supercharged V6, making 400 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque. MSRP is right around $105,000 for the 2025 model year. And this came with the options of touring suspension, Goodyear Eagle F1 Super Sport tires, not the more aggressive Michelin Cup 2s. This has the base cast silver wheels, which are actually 6 to 7 pounds heavier per corner compared to the forged diamond cut wheels. And this also comes with the base audio, not the upgraded KEF system. In terms of mods, this one only has a third cat delete just to open up the sound of this V6. So this is one of the less aggressive ways you can get a Lotus Emira. Although you still have the manual transmission, you have the softer suspension, the less aggressive tire, and the heavier wheel. How does this compare to the softest version of the AMG inline 4 Emira? That's the question of today's video. I've mentioned this before in all of my previous Emira videos, but this interior is a huge step up over the Lotus Evora upon which the Emira is based. High contrast digital cluster, very clear, very crisp. In fact, it's quite a bit nicer than the one in my 2017 NSX. The infotainment is very high contrast as well, very easy to read. Physical knobs for climate control, which is great. Alcantara and stitched leather everywhere. My one gripe, actually, well, two gripes with this interior is, number one, the steering wheel. I don't love this sort of squared off design, although I've gotten used to it, but my real gripe with the steering wheel are the grips behind the 9 and 3 spokes. It just feels very thick and kind of unwieldy. I wish they were slimmer so I could just wrap my hands around in the way that I usually do. And number two is these seats. First of all, they're seated a little bit too high up. I wish I was an inch or two lower. And because the back padding is kind of convex, it kind of sticks out, I don't feel like I'm well situated in the seat. The Lotus Evora seat does a much better job in my opinion. This suspension is a fixed spring and damper. None of the Emiras offer adaptive suspension. Tour, Sport, and Track, and as you can see here, Track gives you the most aggressive powertrain and exhaust. This is a valved exhaust, and it turns down the stability control by 2 steps. Tour gives you the softest everything, powertrain, exhaust, and stability control. And Sport is right in the middle for powertrain and exhaust, and it keeps the stability control fully on. Let's just start out in Track. Why not? Shifter has exposed linkage, which gives this interior a more premium feel. Oh yeah. Nice aggressive sound from this Toyota V6. There is a little bit of supercharger whine, but mostly you just get that V6 induction growl behind your head. Oh wow. So much steering feel. You can just feel every camber in the road affecting the steering. So enjoyable. I feel so connected. This has hydraulic steering, of course. Now, one thing I'm noticing, this Tour suspension is definitely significantly softer than the Sport option. Even though this car is very communicative, I can tell that the responses are dulled. When I first turn into a corner, there's a little bit of a delay before the front end responds. The Tour and the Sport suspension options both give you this amazing feeling of being able to sense what each individual wheel is doing at all times through the chassis. That sensation is still very much here, as you'd expect for an even softer suspension setup where there's just more travel at each corner, but it's definitely not as sharp in the corners. As you can see there, bumps mid-corner make the car kind of shimmy left and right a bit and up and down a few times before it settles. Throttle response is nice, a big improvement over the Evora. Oh yeah, such a nice sound. And the 2 to 3 shift with this transmission, so satisfying. The 3 to 2 is a little bit trickier, but as long as you treat it as a neutral left second instead of a single motion, it's actually quite easy. I do feel that the weight distribution of this car is very rear heavy. When I get on throttle in the lower speed corners, I do get this slight sense of push at the front end, something that I don't feel in a Porsche Cayman, which has a more mid-engine balance. Like right there, I felt it. A little bit of push on throttle. Oh, this shifter is really good, better than most other examples. Oh, such good brake feel once I'm up to speed. At low speed, it can be quite grabby, like the initial resistance from the pedal is quite high. Oh my gosh, this transmission is one of the best examples I felt. Different Emiras definitely have different levels of transmission build quality, I guess. Or maybe quality control is the right word. This car's responses are definitely a bit lazy. That initial turn-in, not as sharp as the sport suspension. This transmission, oh my gosh, I can't stop raving about it. It feels so good. So mechanical, and yet I'm not having any issues with the 3 to 2 shift. Perfect every time. Oh, I love the brake feel. So easy to modulate that brake pedal. I'm following Kevin Jabal driving my NC1 NSX for the first time. Hope he's having a blast. Very different kind of car, right? That might be an interesting comparison in the future because you can get an NC1 2017 model year for not that much more than the price of a new Lotus Emira. 10 to 15% more money for a used NSX. Which one is the better daily drivable mid-engine sports or supercar? That's a really good topic. I'm gonna shortlist that for comparisons to do in the future. But while we're paused here, let's put it into tour mode. The exhaust valve immediately closes. It's significantly quieter even at idle. Of course, the suspension and the steering being fixed and hydraulic respectively, no change there. Wish the suspension, I guess I just wish this had the sport suspension. I think the slight trade-off in terms of ride comfort is easily worth it. This one just, again, has lazier responses and it's very noticeable, I would say. But the real question is, how does this compare to the 4-cylinder AMG-powered Emira, also with the Tour suspension? I heard that the AMG Tour suspension is actually similar in firmness to the V6 with sport suspension. I mean, no chance of keeping up with that nearly 600 horsepower NC1. But this is no slow car. One of my issues with it though is that for the money, there are so many higher performing cars out there, and I know that's not the point of the Emira. This car is meant to be a feel-good car, not so much of a performance bargain. So I understand that point. It's not lost on me, and I appreciate this car for what it is. But what if you do want a little bit more performance? Does the AMG-powered Emira actually give you that? I think it might. A little bit more torque, a quicker shifting gearbox. Let's see if that's actually the better car. All right, we're now in the 2025 Lotus Emira i4 with a dual clutch transmission. This one also has the touring suspension, and this also has the Goodyear Eagle F1 tires, so about as apples to apples as we can possibly get. This is of course powered by the 2-liter turbocharged inline 4-cylinder AMG engine, and it makes a similar 400 horsepower, but a little bit more torque at 354 pound-feet. Redline is 7,200 RPM, and we have an 8-speed dual clutch transmission from AMG as the only transmission choice. Another difference here is that we have electro-hydraulic steering instead of traditional hydraulic in the V6 model. I've seen sources cite between 30 and 50 pounds lighter compared to the V6 with a manual. But one key difference is that the rear subframe had to be changed in order to fit this engine and transmission. So the engine does sit lower and closer to the firewall. With the dual clutch transmission and the AMG engine, this is slightly quicker to 60 miles per hour by about 1/10 of a second. This is a few $1,000s cheaper as well. I think it starts at just under $100,000 before destination. So for your $5,000 to $6,000 of savings, are you actually getting the better driver's car? That's the question. Interior is pretty much the same. This one has the upgraded KEF audio system. Other than giving better audio quality, actually gives us a really nice speaker grille as well that just elevates the overall feel of the interior. Track mode, just like we did in the V6. It does the same things to the powertrain exhaust and the stability control. And we have this very strangely designed gear lever where you start out in park, let's say you want to go into reverse, you push it up once for neutral, then again for reverse, and then to put it back into drive, you put it back into neutral with a pull and then into drive. Thankfully we have these paddle shifters. Sounds like a hot hatch engine right behind my head. Oh yeah, this feels quicker than the V6. There's definitely more low-end torque. Now I drove a sport suspension equipped AMG inline 4 Amira not long ago, and the main complaint I had with that car is still very much the case here. This transmission is terrible. I shouldn't say terrible, there are way worse transmissions out there, but I think it really deters from the driving experience because, as you can see there, let me demonstrate here. Third gear, pull the paddle, second gear. When I pull the paddle, there's at least a half-second delay before the transmission initiates the shift. Once it initiates the shift is nice and snappy, just like any other dual clutch. But the delay from when you pull the paddle to when it starts to shift is inexcusable. It's literally at least half a second. This engine though, definitely less character, less sonorous compared to that V6, but this feels like the more potent power plant. There's definitely more area under the torque curve here. There's really not much turbo lag. As long as you keep the engine above around 3,500, 4,000 RPM, you have plenty of RPMs to play with, all the way up to its 7,200 RPM redline. You do hear some whooshes and whistles from the turbos. And I actually do feel like I sense a slightly different weight distribution here, because on throttle, coming out of some of these lower speed corners, there's less of a push behavior at the front end. This feels a little bit more neutral. Like right there, the nose stayed planted even when I got on the throttle. Oh yeah. The steering, despite being electro-hydraulic, I can't tell any difference in steering feel compared to the V6's traditional hydraulic. This is still full of feedback. But maybe the bigger difference here is the suspension. I can definitely say with high confidence that Tour suspension with a 4-cylinder is a lot firmer than Tour in the V6. This just feels more controlled in the corners. There's sharper responses from the front end. The car just feels a little bit more eager to do exactly what you want, right when you want it to. The other benefit of this 8-speed dual clutch, the gearing is more closely spaced compared to the 6-speed manual. So it's pretty easy to keep this engine in its power band. I think on this road, if I were driving both cars back to back, I would be quicker in this car. I just wish there was less of a delay to this transmission. I really think this feels significantly peppier in a straight line. Similar brake feel here. There's a little bit of grabbiness at the top of the pedal, but once you get deep into the pedal, there's tons of brake feel and excellent modulation. This AMG version definitely feels slightly better balanced, not only because of that weight distribution, but also because of the suspension. Comparing Tour versus Tour, this is the better chassis setup. Now I'm curious to compare this car against a V6 Sport. I feel like the suspension between the two might be very, very similar. The AMG Inline-4 Sport suspension equipped car that I drove definitely felt significantly stiffer than both this and the V6 Sport, and I actually wasn't a huge fan of that car's suspension setup. Oh, that delay and the shift, so bad. Wow. When you get this car up to higher speeds, there's quite a bit of tram lining. Even with the Goodyear Eagle F1 tire, which is less aggressive than the Cup 2, you just feel the steering wheel chattering away, kind of pulling you side to side. It's a very communicative car for a 2025 model year. But which one do I prefer between the V6 Touring and the Inline-4 Touring? That's a tough one. I prefer the suspension setup of this one by far, and the overall weight distribution feels a little bit more neutral. But I gotta say, I like the engine and the transmission of the V6, even though it feels a little bit slower, a little bit clunkier. It's just more satisfying with that amazing 6-speed manual, which is very example dependent, as I found. The one I just drove though was excellent. Such good shift feel. Even the notorious 3-2 downshift felt perfectly fine. And the better sound of that V6 engine I do appreciate. But let me know what you think about the Tour versions of the 4-cylinder and 6-cylinder Lotus Emiras. A big shout out again to Boardwalk Lotus and to Mike, the owner of that V6. Let me know what you think is the best selection of options for the Lotus Emira. Do you go V6, manual, sport? Do you go AMG, dual clutch, touring? What's your pick? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one.